So I'm going to discuss gender in an unusual way to begin with. So you ready? Here's a fork, here's a spoon. If you were to decide which one of these is feminine and which one is masculine, which is which? Not always, but a lot of times when I ask students this question, they say that the fork is masculine and the spoon is feminine. I ask them then to think of like what's the reasoning that you're coming up with that? Like what are the words that you're using to describe the fork, to describe the spoon that's making you decide that one is masculine or feminine? And so if we were together in person in a class, I would have a set of, plastic forks and spoons, and I would walk around to each group and give you a fork and a spoon so that you actually tangibly had it in your hand. So you know which one's which. And let's see, things that have been said about the spoon is that it's soft, that it's gentle, that you eat like cozy foods with it, like soups and ice creams and delicious stuff. The fork gets kind of described as like hard and pokey. Sometimes people bring up the fact that the fork is taller than the spoon. And a lot of times people say that the fork is masculine, right? And the spoon is feminine. That's, I would say, what happens most of the time. I want you to think about for a second how quickly, when I ask that question, which one's masculine, which one's feminine, you didn't struggle to say which was which. And I want you then to look around, like take a second, look around where you're sitting, listening to me talk about this. Look at other items, inanimate items, and be like, is that feminine or masculine, right? It's very strange how we can kind of apply these ideas, apply gender. We can gender inanimate objects. So, okay, with that in mind, fork and spoon, ready? Spoon's going to go away. Can you see what's coming? Now, which one of these is feminine and which one is masculine? When I ask this question of students, because I will go around, I will take away the spoon, I will hand them a knife, ask the question again. I would say still the majority of the time, the fork actually switches from masculine when it's the fork and spoon. And now when students are holding a fork and knife, they say that the fork is feminine and that the knife is masculine, which is really a moment to take in, because think about the fact that they're defining that fork based around what was around them. When the fork had the spoon, it was one thing. When the fork has a knife, it's another thing. And a lot of times that's how gender works. When we're describing things that are feminine, we mean things that aren't masculine, and vice versa. Sometimes students will say that the fork remains masculine and then they say that the knife is feminine. A lot of times the thing that they cite the most, because remember I asked them like what words are they thinking of? They say like thin, skinny. It's like tall and skinny. So kind of another thing to unpack, right? Our ideas in relation to femininity. What we don't get a chance to do right now, but what we oftentimes would do is use the words that you just listed: soft, hard, pokey, sharp, like things like that. We would start that as a list of just broader stereotypes. And what I would ask students to do is write down as many stereotypes of masculinity and femininity as they can think of. So if you were to think through, like, what are the first ones that come to your head? I then Actually, I'm really, really lucky. I'm terrible at typing, like terrible. But my husband is actually a really, really good typer. He's not exactly always accurate, but he can do it really quickly. I use like two fingers and have to look at the screen. It's a disaster, but whatever. I will take the list that students have come up with stereotypes, and he will help me. He does every semester. I'm so lucky. Put them into this gigantic master list of what ends up being probably closing in on a couple hundred stereotypes, because different groups have answered the same thing. And when people have said gentle or something, like 6 groups out of 8 groups said gentle, we'll always mark the fact that like 6 groups said it. So that way they kind of know what was the most popular, what were the stereotypes that were being said over and over. And I can tell you from doing this each semester, big old long list of stereotypes, right? The stereotype that gets said the most for femininity is, oh my goodness, it's escaping me right now. Oh, no, it didn't. It came back. Emotional. That's the one that usually gets said as the most frequently said stereotype for femininity. For masculinity, aggressive. which is interesting because when I kind of pose to students and think about this, would you say that the people that you know in your life that are identify as masculine, would you say that they're really, really aggressive? Maybe I'm an outlier, but I wouldn't say that about most people that I know that identify as masculine in my life. And so I don't know. Maybe other people do. So but if that's the case, that you're like, oh, gee, you know what? I don't really see a lot of aggressive masculinity in my immediate friends and family either. Well, then where does this idea of aggressiveness in relation to masculinity, where does that come from? So what you're going to hear me do all throughout the course, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I don't necessarily have answers. There's a lot that has not been answered or might never be answered in relation to our understanding of gender. And so that's just one of many, many, many. Okay, let's talk about couple different definitions, and then we're going to go into some more examples. We're taking a women and gender studies class. I teach both women's studies and sociology. When I talk about gender, I'm going to rely on sociological definitions, which a lot of times there's overlap between women's studies, gender studies, and sociology. So the sociological definition of biological sex, because you have heard me saying femininity, masculinity. I haven't been saying male or female, and I've been doing that consciously. When we talk about the definition of biological sex, it's kind of interesting in sociology. We're not necessarily talking about chromosomes. We're not talking about body parts. We're not talking about those types of things. We're talking about the labels of what gets labeled male, again, chromosomes, body parts, and so on and so forth, what gets labeled female, secondary sex characteristics, all those types of things. And the fact that those are socially agreed upon. We have used and created and agree upon those labels. Quite honestly, we could wake up tomorrow morning technically and have different words for people who have breasts or XY chromosomes or XX. Like we could relabel all of that. Heck, we could say that now people who have testicles and penises, like that's now a woman. Like the labels, those words in sociology, they're fairly arbitrary in their existence. In the way that we practice and use them, their meaning, they're incredibly, incredibly impactful. When I was a student myself, I was a returning student, so I was attending school as a full-grown adult who's already a parent and things along those lines. But it was about 12, 15 years ago now, when you would learn in women's studies and sociology about the definitions of sex and gender, that wasn't really widely known. You would learn it and you would go, oh yeah, you know what? That does make sense. But it wasn't being discussed in our larger societal experience. I would argue that's different nowadays. I would argue if we sat down with students in junior high and high school, that they're going to have a solid understanding of the fact that biological sex and gender identity can operate in very, very different ways. Sometimes somebody's biological sex and their gender identity are in line with our cisgender, when cisgender means you fit into a gender binary. These are words that are going to come up really quick as we're talking today. But like that, there's a level of understanding nowadays, just more commonly in society, that there is biological sex and then there's gender identity. When we talk about gender identity, I like to use a theory from Weston Zimmerman, and so it comes in 4 different parts. Let me take you through it. It's routine, it's methodical, it's a reoccurring accomplishment. So think about what are the things that you do over and over and over every day that really are like part of your gender experience and how you make your way through gender. I get up every morning. I'm really, really good, which I still am mystified about exercising. Exercise like every morning. Please don't think, oh my gosh, she's like the pinnacle of health. No. No. But I'm really, really good about doing that. If I hop in the shower, I've got a couple of different kinds of shampoos and conditioners. And then some days I have naturally curly hair, so I don't wash my hair with the shampoo, but I wash it with conditioner because it's supposed to be like co-washing. I don't even know. You hear things somewhere and you're like, ooh, I'll try it. And then you're convinced that it does something when it probably doesn't. I don't really wear makeup, but I kind of I'm one of those people that barely has eyebrows, and that's kind of getting worse now that I'm getting gray hair. And so I will fill in my eyebrows. That's like the only makeup that I put on. And if you're wondering why in the holy heck are you still talking about like weird things that you do every day that I don't care about, it's because you do things too every day. You have aspects of your gender performance, and look at that second item on the screen. It's methodical. We put thought into it, we put care into it, and we accomplish our gender every single day. I will go through the day accomplishing my gender. The last thing is then it's managing the ways that we act. It's managing our behavior in light of normative ideas. What are the norms? And norms are something we're going to be talking about soon. Basically, as a preview, norms are just kind of all the unwritten rules that we follow so that we kind of fit in society. But we have to manage our gendered behavior in order to fit in. So routine, methodical, we accomplish it every day. We're thinking about it all the time, even if we don't realize it, because it's not necessarily in the forefront in our heads as much as it might be in the habitual, repetitive kind of aspects of life, but it has a significant impact in the way that we manage our day. Okay, moving on. When we're talking about biological sex and talking about gender, let me give you another example of kind of the power of it. So if you see these cute babies, and I were to ask you, go through, and I'm terrible with left and right too, but if you start with the left-hand corner that has the cute striped background, and then you were to go to the baby with the light yellow background and then the pink, and then you go down to the second row. If I were to say, is this child masculine or feminine, or boy or girl? Students have always, if I show this on a PowerPoint in class, they always like, boy, girl. And I'm like, how do you know? And they're like, and it's like, because I just Googled gender neutral baby faces, and these were the cute ones, right? What age do these adorable babies figure out the implication of their biological sex or gender? Like at what point in their life? Something to think of, because people oftentimes have different answers to this. When you look at the slide and you look at that question at the top, there's something kind of problematic and hurtful about it. And I don't know necessarily if you picked up on it initially, but I have it here so that we can kind of talk about it. When you say, is it, right? Because sometimes when we take away gender, we take away humanity. It is an object, right? And so if you were to say, are they a boy or a girl? And especially nowadays that we have a heightened awareness and understanding of gendered pronouns, and that some people's preferred pronouns might be they and them. But just that basics of human existence. Be on the lookout. If you see somebody removing gender, which is fine, but then when they switch to it, and sometimes it is used in a derogatory way, and so ways to ask, are they a boy or girl? So a phenomenon that is not terribly old is actually, I would argue, a Pinterest era, which, we still live in, but certainly Pinterest kicked off about a dozen years ago or so. A phenomenon that is familiar to us now is the gender reveal party. So that kind of shows you the power of gender socialization. So you've got pink and blue everything. I'm going to take you through like 6,000 pictures. Please stand by. You can have he or she bars, right? You're never going to look at Hershey bars the same way. So, and a lot of times when the gender reveal, right? So we're reveal, and here's the thing, that's a misnomer. Gender is that aspect of the methodical routine accomplishments that we do every day in relation to the norms for our gender identity. You don't get any of that out of an ultrasound of a 20-week-old baby. So really what this is a biological sex reveal party, but that does not sound anywhere near as cute. But a lot of times you have a cake, right? And I'll slow down with hitting the enter button just a little bit. When you cut into it, it's pink or blue. But things that you can do otherwise to celebrate is dump out a box of stuff, or pop a balloon of confetti, or have an older sibling open a box of stuff, or actually blindfold yourselves and put paint all over you. And I cannot judge these types of things, because when Pinterest was first coming out, my daughter was getting ready to go to high school, and we got the opportunity in our school district to figure out what high school would be the best fit for her. And she wanted to have, because she saw these gender reveal parties, she wanted to have a high school reveal party. there was one high school she went to, she actually wanted to try out for the cheer team. She made it on the cheer team. She was clearly going to this high school. But did I still hold a high school reveal party for the child whose high school we knew they were going to? Yes, I did. So whatever people are doing to celebrate, I have no room to judge. Like, I have celebrated something we already knew was happening. So, okay. Other aspects of this: you can play games, you can have scratchers, you can have poppers, you can have silly string, you can have piñatas. It just goes on and on. I didn't stop talking, I'm just being quiet so you can see pictures for a second. So here's another interesting phenomenon that has happened more recently. Now, because think about, wait a second, who celebrates babies? Usually it's a feminine celebration, right? Baby showers and things like that. But now, oftentimes, to do a gender reveal, we do something actually technically fairly masculine. We have explosions, right? So this idea of like including things exploding, that is usually a masculine kind of phenomena in what is usually celebrated in feminine circles, is just kind of an interesting juxtaposition. So, okay. The next thing I'm going to share with you are invitations to these parties. So bear with me as I go through them quickly. Tutus or ties, quarterback or cheerleader, boots or bows, cupcake or stud muffin, lures or lace, rifles or ruffles, guns or glitter, pistols or pearls. These are coming off of Etsy, and it's amazing how much weaponry there is being sold in gender reveal invitations. Let's keep going. Super baby, boy or girl, lashes or stashes. What the buck is it doing? A lot of hunting stuff too. Burnouts or bows, heels or wheels, Luke or Leia, Beauty or the Beast, free throws or pink bows, powders or pearls. That one just kind of strikes me as creepy, but whatever. And the weaponry continues. So. Some awkward ones, right? I thought this last one right there, the Huggies or Chuggies, is interesting. It's basically the masculine equivalent of a shower. Like, bring diapers and drink beer. And then kind of here's a reminder, especially as I was talking to like mentioning weaponry or hunting or things, like kind of remembering how much geographic location and kind of the cultural norms of our geographic location can like lend itself to these kind of celebrations. So when I saw this, like crawfish boil and gender reveal, like I don't know necessarily if there'd be a huge market for that here in Southern California, but definitely maybe in other places in the United States. So you can see that's either or, one or the other, right? Boots or bows, or putters or pearls, and boas and burnouts, and all on and on and on. And I mentioned this word earlier, this idea of a binary. A binary in general is just means a system of two, and those things are oppositional. They are opposite, right? So when you have a gender binary, this is what we're saying. We're saying that there's only two types of people. And there's female-bodied people who are feminine, and there's male-bodied people who are masculine. Your biological sex as female lines up as feminine, or your biological sex as male lines up that you have a masculine gender identity, and that's it. Those are two either or, one or the other, oppositional choices, masculinity, femininity, in that way. So thinking about the gender binary and how often we see this either or, one or the other, black or white, only two choices, and those are choices or opposites kind of experience in relation to gender is fairly frequent. Maybe in some cases nowadays we're starting to understand that it doesn't necessarily need to be as severe of a binary, but I don't know. What do you see in the world around you? This is a class where hopefully when we discuss things, you're seeing all of it happening in life right around you. Think about where you see something like the gender binary. But friends, it is strong. All right, a couple more little things. Want to introduce you to one of the seminal theorists in women's studies, Judith Butler. Butler says, and this was work that is happening in, I believe, the 1970s, so very early on in our understanding, again, of biological sex in relation to gender identity. Judith Butler explained that all of gender really honestly is about a performance. It's something that is not a fact, rather it is something that we are actively doing. Weston Zimmerman's definition is similar to this idea of that it's routine and methodical and a reoccurring accomplishment, something that we are actively doing. And so a lot of times we think, what did I list out for you? Oh, my shampoos and my conditioner, and I fill in my eyebrows, and what? I love cute patterned skirts or whatever, like skirts with cute patterns kind of thing. Like this idea that I'm in control of all those decisions, right? I've made all those, I don't have, like, I get to do, you get to do what we want to do in relation. But really, honestly, when you look at gender socialization around us, and then go back in those babies, right? The gender reveal before a baby is even born. We're being shaped by a lot in the world around us. We are in every which way. Gender's just one example. So Judith Butler, when developing this theoretical writing and work, again, many, many years ago now, utilized something that I would still say is on the on the outskirts. It's not necessarily a widely embraced norm in our society by any means, but it's certainly a phenomenon that we completely understand. Judith Butler used one aspect of performance to show that gender's a performance, and that is drag. There's drag queens and there's drag kings. And what Butler hypothesized is these people are performing gender. And if gender can be performed, then we're all performing gender. Can you see how if gender can be performed, then why is this considered a gender performance? And what I described that I do every day is not a gender performance. It is a gender performance. It's exactly, we have the ways that we choose to perform our gender. And it's not necessarily always those hugely individualistic, nobody else is doing it choices. A lot of times it's being shaped by what we see and learn and pick up and prioritize in the world around us. So this binary thinking, it's either or, yes or no, one or the other, male-bodied people who are masculine, female-bodied people who are feminine. To kind of move from that, you can have a continuum, which is now talking about, instead of just these opposites, it can deconstruct those binaries, because now you can have a whole spectrum. One of the other activities that we won't get a chance to do, but I oftentimes have students do, let's go back to that stereotype list, right? Long, long list. I'll have students then use that, and we'll either draw out on the board, or a lot of times I have a piece of paper that's designed for them to map it out. So I want you to visualize this piece of paper. It's sideways, right? So it's landscape. Yeah, landscape. I think so. And on one edge, it says masculinity, and on the other edge, it says femininity. And if you were to think about what are the most masculine things and what are the most feminine things, like hyper feminine, hyper masculine, put those on the edge, right next to the word masculine or femininity. So I would say for femininity, maybe it's high heels, maybe it's like hot pink color. Like, think of all the different kind of items or emotions or experiences or characteristics that you would put over there. Now, makeup, would you put it right there on the edge? Or would you kind of, if you think about it, because we're just talking about the edges of the paper now, would you kind of maybe move it a little bit towards the middle? Because yeah, it is feminine, but maybe it's not like the edge of feminine. Let's talk about the masculine side. Maybe playing football. But what about watching football? Would watching football go over on the edge where it's like super hyper masculine? Or would watching football maybe be closer to the middle? Because plenty of people who identify as feminine enjoy watching football and are football fans. What about cars? Where would a Ford F-150 go on that kind of piece of paper if you were mapping it out? Where would one of those cute mint green Fiats, right? They're so cute. Or like a Volkswagen Beetle. Let's try Beetle. Like, where would those go? Like, what are masculine cars that are really masculine? What are feminine cars? That somebody who maybe, think about if a person who identifies as masculine, like truly heteronormative masculinity, gets out of one of those adorable little cute colored Fiats. Like, his friends very well could make fun of him for his, girly car. Think about how that works, right? Let's think about drinks. Where would a frappuccino go? Would it be hyper feminine? Would it be towards the middle? Where would beer go? Is it really on the edge, or again, is it towards the middle? Let's think salads. Where would salads go? Where would barbecuing go? Where would jeans go? Jeans would probably go right in the middle, except there's also jeans that are really pretty feminine, and jeans, denim, right, that are kind of masculine. What about glasses? What about tattoos? Tattoos would probably go in the middle too. People who are feminine and people who are masculine have tattoos. But think about like the the placement on the body. That's gendered a lot of times. Or the content of the tattoo. So to have a butterfly on your back shoulder or maybe above your hip bone, right? Think about this idea of a continuum. Look around you again. Think about it for the rest of the day. Go through and be like, how feminine is that? How masculine is that? Or is it just kind of in the middle and very, very neutral? Like just the food, the commercial, like whatever it is that the social media, the social media that we will all be probably consuming at some point today for the most part. What do you see? Where do you see that binary, only one or the other thinking? Where do you see more of a continuum? Where have you experienced, and think about your own gender performance? Hopefully, even though I know this has been long to go through, hopefully it's given you a heck of a lot to think about and talk about.